Hi class, welcome to our lesson in General Biology 1. This is Sir Alex Pascal. Today we'll be discussing our lesson 5.3. Today we'll be tackling some genetic and cell cycle related illnesses and disorders. So these are some of the most common genetic and cell cycle related disorders that are present in the world today. So the goal of today's lesson is for us to be able to identify disorders and diseases that result from the malfunction of the cell during the cell cycle. So as we've discussed so far, cell cycle is necessary if we want to proliferate or if we want to increase the number of cells. This happens via mitosis and meiosis, and this is very important in development and growth of human being. Sometimes, however, the cell cycle, uh, no matter how orderly it is and no matter how punctual it is in identifying errors during cell division, sometimes some issues happen wherein the cell cycle itself become defect. So the cell cycle, like I've mentioned, ensures that the cell divides and proliferate. And because of these process available within the cell, it is also important that the cell has a program wherein it can terminate this proliferation. When we say proliferate, nagpaparami. So we're increasing the number. So via cell cycle, mitosis and meiosis, we can increase the number of cells in our body. And because this program is available within the cell, there is also a program that ensures that the cell uh, could terminate this process when it is necessary. As we've learned, cell cycle is used when repairing damaged cells or when we want to replace old cells, or even used when we want to develop limbs or parts. But there's also a way for cell, like I mentioned, to terminate this process, and this is called cell death, or in a scientific term, apoptosis. So you can some pronounce this as apoptosis, some as apoptosis. So I'll just keep pronouncing it apoptosis. This apoptosis is, I say, programmed cell death, and it activates when it is necessary after, for example, the damaged cells have already been repaired or the old cells have already been replaced. And you can actually see this apoptosis process in tadpoles. You know that when a tadpole, or uh, y- yeah, you know when a tadpole does not need that tail anymore as it grows, so it can eliminate unwanted cells. Example is the removal of tails of the tadpoles. Another example is as the fetus develops, it creates spaces between the cells. So it removes the cells that are the muscles and the cells that are in between our fingers in order for us to create the fingers that we need in order for us to grasp or write anything. And also, it is used when removing cells that is beyond repair. So, for example, you have a damaged cells that cannot be repaired anymore. Apoptosis can activate to remove that cell in order for it not to cause any problems in our body. So both cell cycle and apoptosis plays a major role in the development and growth of our body and of the cells. As an example here, a tadpole, as the tadpole grows, the tail, as you can see, disappears. So the cells on present in these tails slowly starts to die out via apoptosis, while the limbs starts to develop via cell cycle. So this is a clear example of cell cycle and cell death available in species, and this is also present in us as humans. But as I've mentioned, sometimes this process of cell cycle and cell death can malfunction, can have a defect. And when there is an issue with the cell cycle, For example, the cells keep proliferating non-stop or uncontrollably, or that apoptosis is not activating, the result could be a very serious disease called cancer. So today, the first disease that we'll be talking about is cancer. So what is cancer? Cancer is basically a disease where the cells proliferate uncontrollably, like the moving picture here. So, a cancerous cells, it starts to grow uncontrollably without needing signals for it to divide. It just divides on its own, and that could be dangerous for a lot of reasons. First is as the cell grows, it creates tumors. So tumors are lumps of tissues that can either be benign or malignant. Benign tumors are tumors in your body or lumps of tissues in your body that are not cancerous. More dangerous ones are what we call malignant because these malignant tumors can grow into a more severe state and can be cancerous. Although, even though benign or non-cancerous tumors are not as dangerous as malignant, some of them can still be very dangerous to the human. As an example, is a tumor in your brain. Even though that tumor in the brain is not cancerous, the fact that it's a tumor in your brain and it creates a lump inside your skull can create a lot of issues for the brain and for the person with that tumor. So even though just because it's a benign and it's not cancerous doesn't mean it's not an issue. It could still be an issue. But more so for malignant cancers because malignant cancers or malignant tumors can actually metastasis. When we say metastasis, it is the ability of cancerous cells to actually invade or spread out. They can invade the other tissues nearby, for example, a breast cancer. So one way to check issues with breast cancer is checking tumors. So for females around about age of 35 and above or 45, it is advisable to start checking on lumps around the breast. And it's because sometimes if you let it grow, if you found a tumor and let it grow, that tumor, especially if it is malignant, can start to spread on the other tissues surrounding and it start to create this bigger lump hanggang lumaki siya ng lumaki and it can create very serious issues with the body. Moreover, it can actually spread on other parts of your body. Some malignant cancers can actually travel via some of your blood vessels. So some of these cancerous cells can go onto the bloodstream and travel somewhere else in your body and situate there. For example, you have a cancer cell, let's say on your arm, it can travel up to your shoulder or whatever in your body. That is the one of the feature of a cancer cells is its ability to spread anywhere in our body, and that ability to spread is called metastasis. There are some differences between the normal cells and the cancer cells. One of which, like I've mentioned, cancer cells grow even with the absence of signals telling it to grow. So, for example, like our example earlier with the toad, signals starts to get released, telling the cells around the limbs area to grow the legs and the arms. But sometimes, when there's a defect on the cell, even without the signals telling that cell to grow, these cancer cells can start growing on their own. And they can also ignore apoptosis signals. So, like I've mentioned, like in the tadpole, the tails, there's some signals telling the tails to start dying out so it can be removed from the body. So sometimes there are some cancer cells that also ignore these apoptosis signals, making them very dangerous because they keep growing and growing and they cannot be stopped because they ignore the apoptosis signal. Moreover, they can invade other parts of the body and they can even spread anywhere in the body. Moreover, they can signal blood vessels to supply nutrients, and this can be very dangerous because if blood vessels starts to move and starts to develop, grow towards that cancer cell will start to get more nutrients from those blood vessels, from the food that you're eating, and from other nutrients that you supply to your body, and that can be nutrients for that cancer cells to keep growing. Moreover, another very dangerous uh, feature of cancer cells is some of them can even hide from immune system because our immune system is not only developed to fight bacteria and viruses entering our body, but also our immune system can actually kill cells that can be dangerous in our body, even cancer cells. We have a natural killer cells called T cells, and they are part of our immune system that targets this kind of cells. And sometimes some cancer cells has the ability to hide themselves from these killer cells or from these immune system. Moreover, they can even trick your immune system in helping them to stay alive and grow. Moreover, as they develop, they can even accumulate changes in their chromosomes. They even have cells that has double the amount of chromosomes inside. So usually we have 46 chromosomes. So that way they can have about 92 chromosomes inside a single cell. And that's very mutated. That's why it can be very dangerous inside the body. And lastly, they even rely on different kinds of nutrients. So they can find their own source of nutrients, or they can even make their own nutrients that helps them grow. That makes them very, very dangerous because they just keep on growing and growing even when you cut off, let's say, a blood vessel or food supply or nutrient supply. Some cells, some cancer cells can make their own nutrients by themselves. So continuing on with cancer, so cancer cells can develop due to some errors in cell division, and they can also be the result of damage to DNA, some damage in DNA, especially the proto-oncogenes. Damage in those genes can result in the development of cancer, and they can even also be inherited from your parents. For example, parents with lung cancer can um, share this line or transfer this line to some of their kids. There's also some risks involved in cancer. For example, some chemicals. So people who smokes or you're working in a factory setting wherein you inhale a lot of carcinogenic or you deal with a lot of carcinogenic chemicals can even lead you to develop cancers. Some of them can be radiation. So, for example, working in power plant, you have a lot of um, chance or risk of developing cancer. So, radiations, chemicals, smoking, also, old age. As we grow older, our immune system gets tends to be weaker. And when our immune system tends to be weaker, we tend to get more illnesses and diseases, and one of them is cancer. And the most common thing is also diet. Well, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar, but if you guys heard, it's actually true that burnt food, so yung mga mahilig sa sunog, limbawa sa mga barbecue, are actually very carcinogenic. Of course, if you eat it in large amounts or even small amounts for a long period of time, can finally result in cancer. So it's advisable not to eat those. And if you eat them, just very small amount and not palagian. Moreover, aside from other food that can cause cancer, also your weight can be an issue for cancer. So obese people have more tendency to actually develop cancer. So extra weight, actually putting on so much weight is also a risk for cancer. So let's talk about some of the treatments for cancer. One way to check cancers or checking information about the type of cancer you have is by doing biomarker testing. So doing biomarker testing, what they do is they look for genes and proteins or substances around that cancer that can provide information about that cancer. And this is very important because then the doctors and the surgeons can make an informed decision on what kind of treatment is necessary to fight that cancer. One of the most common way for treating cancer is chemotherapy, wherein we use high doses of drugs that will target those cancer cells and slowly kill them. And this can be very traumatic to the body because not only these drugs can kill those cancer cells, they often also have to target a lot of the other cells in our body. That's why people who undergo chemotherapy start losing hair, vomits a lot, it starts to lose a lot of weight. It's because it's very strenuous and traumatic to the body. Another way is called hormone therapy, wherein hormone therapy is mostly used for breast and prostate cancer. Because breast and prostate cancer, breast for female mostly, although some men have breast cancer, also for male above age 45, uh, are also advised to have prostate examination because prostate cancer development can start around that age. These cancers are affected a lot by the hormones in your body. So hormone therapy can be used in treating breast and prostate cancers. Another way is immunotherapy, wherein we boost or strengthens the immune system of the person to fight off the cancer. Another most common way to treat cancer is via radiation. So we fight high doses of radiation. Radiation can also kill cancer cells. Stem cells, or these are very important cells that can be developed into any types of cell you want. So stem cells, it's like this type of cell, and it can be used to develop, let's say, an epithelial cells, or to make a cell derive a skin cell, or even sometimes it can create a muscle cell. So in cancer, they use stem cells to restore destroyed blood forming cells. So because like I mentioned, chemotherapy and even radiation therapy not only destroys cancer cells, but some of the cells in your body. That's why these two are very strenuous or very traumatic to your body. And in order for you to restore the health that you previously have, uh, they can use a stem cell and create that cell or tissue that you've lost from this treatment so that you can restore some parts of that missing cells to help you recover quicker. And another common treatment is surgery, wherein a surgeon would open you up and cut down that cancer. And a lot of cancer treatments use surgery, especially if the cancer is very, very big. And lastly, it could be targeted therapy, wherein they targeted the changes in the cancer. So what that means is that instead of targeting the cancer itself, they're targeting the various factors that affect the growth of cells. Like I mentioned kanina, cancer cells can persuade or signals blood vessels to supply them nutrients. So targeted therapy is tina-target nila instead of cancer, tatargetin nila yung blood supply and remove that nutrient supply so that the cancer can die on its own. There's a lot of ways. So these are some of the most common ways to treating cancer. So cancer is a very big issue around the world and also in the Philippines. So having a knowledge of what cancer is and having an informed ideas of the treatments, the risk factors, I'm my other goal is to help you guys be more aware with the issue of cancer and not to treat it lightly. It's pagdating nyo at certain age, you're more aware and you're more ready to take test na hindi kayo matakot na i-check if, especially if you are prone to cancers. For especially for female breast cancer, it's around age 45, and for men prostate cancer, around also at that same age, you have to start checking to see if you are still okay. And as soon as you felt something, you felt a lump, go check on your doctor because it's better to be safe than you guys in danger. So another genetic issue that we're going to discuss today is called trisomy 21, which is the most common name for it is what we call the Down syndrome. Down syndrome is another genetic disorder that results from having three copies of chromosome 21. Remember, we only have two copies of each chromosome, one from dad and one from mom. Sometimes, instead of having only two copies of a certain chromosome, we end up with three. And if it happens to be the chromosome 21, that's when we start to have Down syndrome. So as you can see here, these are the chromosomes you have, one from mom and one from dad. And then on the 21st chromosome, the chromosome 21, instead of having only two copies, you ended up having three. And what that results is having Down syndrome. And it results in some birth defects. Some of the birth defects issues is vision and hearing impaired issues, also learning problems. So the development of the brain is not equal to the projected development of the brain at a certain age. So, mas mahirap sila na matuto kasi yung brain develop nila is not normal. And also having specific facial features. So, some of them can be, yung neck mo is very connected to the shoulder. Another way is you have a smaller eyes, you have a rounder face, and you have a hooded eyes. Uh, so that's some of the facial features when you have Down syndrome. It is actually the most common genetic birth defects that 1 in every 800 births in the Philippines is a Down syndrome birth. And even though the kid has Down syndrome, it doesn't mean na hindi successful yung buhay nila. Some Down syndrome patients can live up to 60 years old and live a life na successful naman. Some are savant. When we say savant, they are quite normal. What we mean by that is they can function as a normal person in the society. They still work, they still, studies. Of course, there's some issues pero hindi sila kasing lala because Down syndrome is varied from a person to person. Some can be very severe and some can be very mild that even though they look like and have Down syndrome, but the way that they act, the way that they think, is like similar to a normal person with two copies of chromosome 21. There's a lot of types of Down syndrome, but one is translocation Down syndrome, wherein it's a type of trisomy 21 where it can be actually be inherited from your parents. And the other one is mosaic trisomy 21, which occurs in cell division after the egg is fertilized. So after the egg is fertilized and turns into a zygote, it will start to what we call divide, tama? So it starts to undergo mitosis for the development of the fetus. But sometimes nagkakaroon ng issue na some of the cells will end up with having three chromosomes at 21 and some cells have normal numbers of chromosomes. So magkakaroon yung development ng bata, yung cell niya is a mix of cells with three copies of chromosome 21 and some cells are two copies of chromosome 21. So it's still Down syndrome, but it's called the mosaic trisomy 21. This is a rare case of Down syndrome. As of now, walang cure for Down syndrome. But ang ginagawa natin is we targeted some of those birth defects. So for example, some of Down syndrome patients have issues with hearing and eyes. We targeted those issues and helped them have better vision and better hearing. We also help them with learning problems. So there are some special schools or some schools have special learning centers for students with Down syndrome. Some Down syndrome patients also have issues with the heart, and we targeted those areas for them to have a healthier life by already parang focusing on din sa mga issues na pwede sila magkaroon. So, ngayon, yun lang yung pag-usapan natin about some cell-related or cell division, cell cycle-related disorders. There's a lot of there out there, and but I hope you guys are informed and hope to understand that these diseases sometimes hindi naman fault ng mga tao. Sometimes it's just the cell having issues and the person ended up having the illnesses and disorders. It is not something against them, especially for patients with Down syndrome, especially if they're born with it, or especially since they're born with it. So, yun lang yung lesson natin today. If you guys have any questions about more genetic related issues, you guys can ask me. And but for now, that's the lesson for today. So yeah, and I hope you guys have a great day.